you have to think, man, this looks pretty damn strong. I 3-bet pre-flop, I bet the flop on a dry board, I bet big on the turn, which is not a great turn for out of position, and out of position just check raises me to, over half my stack. That looks very damn scary here. We've got a 2.2x open raise by Vorta is back. I actually like this open raise size quite a bit. Now, he is very deep, 300 big blinds deep. When you're playing deep or stacked, it makes a little bit of sense to start raising to a larger sizing to put more money into the pot when deep. But overall, I like this 2.2x sizing a lot. In fact, it's the sizing that I use myself. Okay, so flops ace, queen, 3, and Vorta smashes this board, right? He's going to have all of the aces, all of the queens, all of the ace queens. His opponent never has aces or queens. His opponent probably doesn't have ace queen, or at least not very often. So Vorta is doing very, very, very well here. And so this lead makes no sense. Vorta has more nutted hands. He's got more good hands, like let's say ace jack, ace 10, ace king, and he's super deep, which helps him. So it makes no sense for out of position to say, hey, I have a decent hand now, and therefore I will lead. He will have decent hands. He will have a set of 3. He's here 100%. But just because there's a couple of hands that are doing quite well does not mean that your whole range is doing well enough for you to consider leading. That's not how poker works, right? If your range is significantly behind, usually when you're the caller versus the open raiser, you just want to check your whole range. And you want to check when you have a very strong hand, when you have a medium hand, nothing, when you have a draw, backdoor draw, whatever. So I'm not a big fan of this line by Toko. So, Vorta is not going to be folding a whole lot. And the turn is the Jack of Hearts, and Big Blind leads again. He's most likely a recreational player. So when he leads multiple times for this sizing, he's basically saying like, hey, I've got something decent, right? Maybe he has an ace, maybe 2 pair. Maybe he has a flush and he's just trying to get value here. I mean, betting half pot thing, hey, if I bomb it, maybe my opponent folds an ace. I'm just going to bet a sizing that allows me to get called. Okay, and so Vorta is saying, hey, I've had enough of this. You're just making thin value bets. I don't give you a whole lot of credit for having a really strong hand. I'm just going to be raising here. Big blind calls, and now Vorta knows he's in a bit of trouble, right? In case he is bluffing. Because Toko may lead thinly as a bluff or with some shitty value hand, but he's not just going to call a 31 big blind raise. And so again, this makes no sense. On the turn, in position saying, I've got a flush, his range is still ahead. And so versus that very strong range of bluffs and very strong value bets, you're not leading. If you wanted to lead, you should lead much smaller. So this line just doesn't make any sense. This player is likely just looking at his hand and not really at his range. And that's a significant mistake you see, at low stakes quite a bit. So I'm thinking he probably has something like a straight, maybe a flush, maybe 2 pair. Maybe he just overplays a hand like, queen 3. Is he pure bluffing with 4, 5 with 1 heart? Unlikely. Very unlikely. Wow. And he gets shipped on. So if Vorta raised to like 105, maybe he's repping a flush, right? Maybe he's repping like a set. But unlikely. Would he really? I mean, if he had a set of queens, he'd always raise the flop. He probably wouldn't raise the turn, or maybe not, and he wouldn't go with a big raise. So he's not representing a set. He's representing exclusively a flush. And when he ships her 270 big blinds, he's representing exclusively a big flush. A hand like, for instance, King 5 of Hearts. Big blind calls. Wow. That's crazy. All right, let's start from the beginning. So open raise with king queen, obviously standard, right? Even under the gun, this hand is an open raise, let alone on the button. Very high EV open raise. So the big blind calls you with 10-2 suited, which is kind of loose, but given the small sizing pre-flop, I think it's fine. The big blind obviously should not be leading here with any hand, even though he has a decent equity hand, right? He's got a decent flush draw. And so versus the lead of half pot, I definitely agree that Vorta should just be calling. But then he turns his hand into a bluff for 600 big blinds total. I mean, is this play technically correct sometimes? Perhaps, sure. But remember, he's playing against a recreational player who's leading out and is saying, hey, I probably just have something. Then he leads out again, saying he probably has something. Then he calls a huge raise, saying I definitely have something. And then you're trying to bluff a sticky fish off a very good hand, which is sometimes the right play, but generally not a recipe for success. So perhaps he's seen this player like fold, flushes face up on other tables, stuff like that, and he thinks, oh, I can run this guy over. If I raise to 270 big blinds, he will never call anything. And sure, that's possible, but we're playing low stakes Zoom here. It's unlikely that you have this read on your opponent, and so this just seems like a major spaz. So I'll give the big blind a 3. His fundamentals definitely need a bit of improvement. And I'll give Vorts a 10 out of 10 for heart, but in terms of his technical play, I'll give him a 4. I think this is just unnecessary. When it comes to beating low stakes poker, these types of very fancy plays are generally not necessary. Wait for people to play too many bad hands and punish them by playing better flush draws than theirs, by playing better top pairs than theirs, right? By value betting thinly and not them not folding, right? Or letting them spaz out. Taking money away from them by reading into timing tells and sizing tells and different lines that don't make sense. You don't have to force it like this. These plays do make sense occasionally, but that's not the way to crush low stakes poker. It's just by letting others make stupid mistakes and capitalizing rather than just spazzing, hoping that your opponent finds these very thin folds. So, not a big fan of either play. Usually we have a strong start to the stream. This one was not quite so strong. Do you think Magnus Carlsen would be a very good poker player? He's an intelligent guy and he loves strategy games. So, I mean, he's obviously got a leg up, right? So, no, there's no guarantee he'll make it. There's other skills involved as well. But sure, I mean, if I could pick between a random person making it in poker or him, I would definitely pick him. Eventually, the small blind raises, and actually using a 2.7x sizing, which I think is okay. There's a lot to be said about that. Not for 2 hours, WXR, but we can talk about this. Long story short, it's absolutely fine. So the big blind 3-bets around 3x. Seems fine to me. Not exactly 3x, but whatever. Okay, call. Queen 7-3 is a pretty dry board, and so the big blind is going to be c-betting a pretty wide range here. Big blind is going to have all of the pocket queens, kings, aces, ace queens, some of the king queens, right? Maybe some of the pocket sevens, and even if you have a hand like pocket tens here, your hand's looking pretty good. There's not much to worry about, so expecting a small c-bet here a decent amount of the time. Expectations were met, small bet, seems fine. And a call by the big blind, fair enough. It's a board on which you're not going to never check raise, but also like not check raise that often. It's a board that doesn't really hit the out of position player too much. Pocket the 8 hits pocket 8, which both players could have. 8-7 suited, perhaps. Maybe the big blind player could have a hand like queen 8 offsuit. That would be kind of dirty, right? If you just call down with king queen here in FJ shoes and you get outrun by queen 8. So the big blind bets around 90% pot, which, you know, I mean, you definitely want to be betting large here. If you have a hand like ace queen, I mean, you kind of underplayed the flop. You wish the pot were bigger, right? And when you would go back on the flop, I mean, we don't want the pot to be $25 when we have ace queen. We want it to be whatever. We want to be all in as soon as we can. So we lost a bit of value if we had a hand like ace queen, and now we want to make this pot a lot bigger. So the big blind bets. And the big blind is completely uncapped, right? The big blind can have every set except for pocket threes here, over pairs, couple of 2 pairs as well. So when he just bets 90% pot on a try board like this, and the out of position player check raises, man, especially at 100 NL, you have to think, man, this looks pretty damn strong. I 3-bet pre-flop, I bet the flop on a dry board, I bet big on the turn, which is not a great turn for out of position, and out of position just check raises me to, you know, over half my stack. You know, that looks very damn scary here. Very scary. So if I were the in position player, I'd be very cautious here. But he does call. River 5 doesn't really change anything. I mean, 9-6, I don't really see being a thing, right? Maybe FJ was check raise bluffing 5-6 and now has a pair, but you cannot expect that pair to be good very often unless XUT specifically has 10-9 here. So Doesn't change a whole lot. If FJ wants to bet here, he should chip. There's around 40% pot left. All in. Wow, okay. So, you cannot fault the big blind for playing his hand in this manner. I like the 3-bet, obviously. I like the C-bet, obviously. I like the turn bet. I don't really think this is a hand you should be checking back very often. The only question is, can you continue on the turn and river? You could even shove all in on turn, right? Your hand is very... I mean, your hand is going to be in need of a little bit of protection at least. So, and if villain were overplaying a hand like ace, queen, king, queen himself, at least he would call it off. So I don't really blame him for calling down, but I would say in general, guys, when you see plays like this at 100 NL, these are rarely bluffs. So yes, we saw a spaz bluff here, and we saw a spaz bluff in the very first hand with king, queen. But honestly, whenever I review my students' games, right, when I see opponents in their showdowns, I rarely see any of this. So this is kind of the, the crazy stuff. There's a reason why these were the biggest hands of the session. So yeah, can't blame the big blind for continuing, although versus nits, I'd be looking to perhaps make some tight folds. Not high stakes, that would be much more difficult. But here, yeah, you can maybe fold. As for the small blind play, I don't mind calling the 3-bet, although you could 4-bet. I don't mind the flop call, although you could check raise, but on turn it's just time to fold. I mean, you block aces and ace queen, I guess, but then you also block some draws, like 5-6 suited. You have very little equity, and you're just praying that your opponent folds, right? So I'm not really a big fan of that one. This one is an 8.5 out of 10. The small blind, I'll give him a 4. I'll give him a 3. I'll give him a 10 for heart, right? Ton of heart, but this play is just, it's just unnecessary. It's just like unnecessary and far too aggressive. What do you guys think? I mean, definitely 10 out of 10 for entertainment as well.